Today we will talk about 10 things that can negatively affect your child's sexual development. And some of these things may seem very simple to you, very such that, but in principle, they have no impact. But when I work with children, already with adult children, who have experienced such psychological sexual seduction from parents, I have the impression that it greatly damages the child's psyche and significantly affects their happy sexual life. So let's figure out what parents should not do. And the first point I would make here is that a child, which, for example, has already reached the age of 6 to 7 years, is quite capable of washing their genitals independently. That is, the child should be taught this. And we see that many parents, especially if they are of the opposite sex, wash their children. And this continues even until adolescence, when the child basically starts to feel embarrassed. They don't want to show their body. They might protest, rebel, but the parents don't pay attention to this. They ignore it and say, well, what's the big deal? We are your parents. It's your dad, father. Oh, or if it's a boy, the mother might wash him and he feels awkward. It's already uncomfortable for him, but he can't say no to his mother. In such cases, the mother turns out to be very insensitive to the child's feelings. So don't do this. Teach the child from the age of 4 to 5 so that by around 6 to 7 years old, the child is already washing and even bathing themselves. So around the age of 7, a child starts to feel a sense of modesty, which is normal. They should already be a bit shy about changing clothes in front of their parents, and we see that many children feel anxious about this. The second point, which I do not recommend, is walking around naked in front of your children, that is, without clothes, especially if you are a parent of the opposite sex to your child. It also has a negative impact when, for example, a mother walks around naked in front of her daughter. So we do not, very often parents ask such questions like, is it not allowed to go to the bathhouse? We go together and the child bathes and we are naked there. But I do not recommend doing this. Somewhere in a textbook on sexual education, I came across the phrase that the relationships between parents and children, specifically sexual relationships, should have such an untouched nature. That is, well, yes. Therefore, you should not demonstrate your genitals to the child, because as the child grows older, they eventually find it disgusting. And this can later manifest in the child having thoughts that even the idea of touching the father or mother who walked naked in front of them during childhood evokes a thought. Disgust, they start to feel nauseous, they avoid touching their parents' bodies, hugs, they avoid. And these are all consequences of the fact that the child was disgusted. The child experienced a very unpleasant feeling when such parents say, for example, let them get used to the naked body, let them accept. Yes, a child can get used to their own naked body, but why does the child need to see your naked body? Just think about that. For example, I had a very unpleasant case in my practice where a mother was completely naked, bending over to wash her hair without underwear, and the daughter would sit down and she would draw her genitals. In this case, it was a violation of the psychological, physical, and sexual boundaries of the daughter, because such a mother didn't even think about what her little daughter, her teenage daughter, was feeling at that moment. Once in my childhood, I experienced a similar stress when my father got drunk and appeared before me completely naked. And for the first time at the age of 10, I saw all of that. And I was very scared. The next day I fell ill. I had a fever of nearly 40 degrees. I felt nauseous and I was vomiting. And all of this was psychosomatic and a reaction to what I had seen. Since then, I distanced myself greatly from my father and avoided any contact with his skin. I found it disgusting. What did this lead to? To the fact that for a long time I worked in psychotherapy on my fear of men, because at that time he scared me. I was unprotected. I could never have imagined that my father could be so dangerous to me. I carried this fear throughout my life. I am happy that I had the opportunity to go to psychotherapy to heal this trauma, but many children will not have such an opportunity, so this can generally affect the child's ability to let go freely, to relax towards their own body, or a partner, a sexual partner, or such a child might take a hysterical path and seek revenge on the opposite sex for the mistake, the error that the father made. Simply to take revenge on men for being frightening, for being strong. And the third thing I do not advise parents to do is to sleep with the child in the same bed, especially not to have sex when you think the child is sleeping nearby. Even if the child is small, it's better to place the crib next to your parental bed. If it's a very small child, do not get the child used to lying in your bed. If the child is afraid of the dark, anxiously very much, then they run to your bed. The problem here is not that they are afraid, but that there is some psychological, emotional reason why they are afraid to sleep alone. And here you need to figure it out. Maybe this is generally some negative symptom from the family system. Something is going wrong in the family system. But you only see the symptom, the fear, and you try to help the child by letting them into your bed. I have seen such cases where children slept with their parents, not only until their teenage years, but even beyond. Even at 20 years old, they would lie down and sleep together. And this, in fact, greatly destroys sexuality. Thank you. And in general, the sexual life of the child, now an adult child. You cannot claim that you control your body while you sleep. If, for example, a daughter sleeps with her father, the father cannot guarantee that he will never have an erection and that the daughter won't touch him, won't snuggle up to him, won't notice it. And this is not just some incident that can be ignored. This can be very traumatizing for the girl. As for the boy who sleeps with his mother in bed, this is also dangerous because the boy becomes fixated on the mother, and it will be very difficult for him to separate, to detach from the mother, because at night they might cuddle and the boy will feel the touch of his mother's body. And even a small child already has the ability to become aroused, sexually aroused. We all know this. This is how the body is designed, both for a child and an adult, that the first erection can be observed even in infancy. Not to mention if a mother sleeps with a teenage boy, what this might lead to. Fourth, what should not be done with the child in terms of sexual education is allowing situations where the child can witness sexual relations between father and mother, because even if it's behind the wall with moans and groans and cries, the child understands everything. The child cannot withstand such a level of sexual arousal that they begin to feel we can be near. There is witnessing the sexual relations of their parents. This can lead to cases, as I have in my practice, of girls who later, even in their teenage years, start suffering from cystitis. And these cases of cystitis can become chronic. Boys can also experience some sexual difficulties on a physical functional level, including overexcitement, which can lead to increased blood flow in the genitals of a young child, teenager or younger. And I know of cases where a child later observed the expansion of varicose veins, varicocele, in the groin area, and this later required treatment and even surgical intervention. Because the child of such a mother was sleeping next to the mother at 19, 12 years old, and the mother pressed her body. The child felt this arousal, sexual. Yes, there was nothing between them, but it's the body. You can't control it when you sleep, so it's better not to do this. It's better for the child to sleep separately from the very beginning, because in sleep we don't need anyone. This is still the phase of autonomy, the phase when we emerge from fusion and are in our own self, within our own boundaries. A fifth, jokes about a child's body can have a very traumatic effect, especially about if it's a girl, the father might say something about her breasts. Well, such sexually oriented jokes, especially if they come from parents of the opposite sex, but also from the same sex, are very undesirable. Well, I'll give an example when a father joked with his daughter, and even the mother did the same. My mother did that, and I know of a case where a father also said, "Oh, what beautiful little breasts you have," and this is, unpleasant for the child. If you imagined how you would feel at the time when your parents would say the same to you, you would understand why this shouldn't be done. Therefore, this matter, well, much more empathy is required than usual, because the sexual zone is a very sensitive area, and it's much easier to damage a child's sexuality than their entire psyche. Seventh, as the child grows up, parents talk to the child about sexual struggles, sexual development, about the body. Mothers talk to girls about menstruation, and with boys about erections, because children can be frightened by such manifestations of their bodies. And if, for example, with a girl about sexual development is discussed by the father, and with the boy, the mother leads these conversations. This can also negatively affect the child's sexuality, as they feel a much stronger sense of shame than if this conversation seemed to be between them and a parent of the same gender. If you start conversations with a child about sex, about sexual intercourse, about where children come from, then you need to talk about it calmly, without showing shame, without making light of the issue. What matters is not what you will say, but rather what matters is how, in what tone you will say it. Choose words that are understandable and appropriate or for their age to explain this process. But, as I have already mentioned, never use yourself as an example. Never. Tell a child that mom and dad or dad go to bed and something happens and a baby appears. Do not use such examples. If the child asks you how it was with you, with mom and dad, you can gently deflect the question and say, I would prefer not to. Do not use yourself and dad as examples. But usually, this is how it happens with people. Like this and like that. 7th point. There are harsh forms of upbringing, such as beating. Children are beaten with a belt, hit with hands, hit. Responsibility with a wet towel or something else. But when this beating happens, bare skin. And if it's done by a parent of the opposite gender, it is, now I'm going to hit on the bare skin. Also, humiliation. And this is stimulation. Stimulation of the genital area. Because the buttocks belong to the genital area and can cause, during the beating in the child, sexual arousal. The child fixates on this arousal because the first time a person feels arousal under whatever circumstances, that is how it will be fixed for their entire life. In this case, and therefore such a child may require, in order to achieve full satisfaction, precisely beatings and various BDSM forms of sexual relationships. Also included here is the topic of punishment. By stripping. This was very common in the Soviet Union, in kindergartens. Such punishments were used by caregivers when they would say, well, take off your underwear and put the child on the windowsill. I don't know if you remember or no, but in my time this was very popular, and such a measure of punishment, it completely destroyed the child's self-esteem. It led to a very profound sense of shame. Such a child could grow up and never experience an orgasm, or such a child could develop exhibitionism. This is showing one's genitals to people who do not expect it, and deriving from it sexual pleasure. And finally, the 8th point, it's touching the organs with an ear. The reproductive organs, the genitals, the breasts. If it's a girl, parents be very careful with this. It can also negatively affect your child and, in general, destroy her happy sexual life. If you like this video, I'm looking forward to your likes, your engagement, your comments. Share this video on social media. It's very important for parents. Let other parents also receive this information.